So Blake, I feel like I say this a lot, but I feel like maybe this time it's actually going to be true that we're going to hear the most name drops in this episode than we ever hear because of our guest today.
The real question will be, will I recognize any of them?
Welcome to the ChurchGear podcast, where we pull the tech director out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm Blake Hodges, the marketing guy who has no idea about anything he markets. I'm here with the best CEO that I've ever had, Toby Walters.
You know, pandering to me is not going to help you from getting fired today.
Well, I left off there in my script, the best CEO ChurchGear's ever had, which we've only had one. So,
am I the CEO? Is that my title now?
CEO, founder, class clown. I think it all applies.
Perfect.
All right, so Toby, I hear that you got something about the Super Bowl to tell me.
I had a story about Snoop Dogg. So Snoop Dogg and I are buddies, as you know.
If this is true and you're just now telling me, I'm pissed.
Okay, so I went to a Ben Rector live CD or record release party just a few weeks ago, and it was a super fun event. Ben made this movie with a collection of music videos along with his record, and so we got to be in the theater and see the movie along with hearing the record. But one of the songs Snoop Dogg raps on.
On a Ben Rector album?
On a Ben Rector album.
No,
so
don't believe it.
At the end of the album listening party, he did a Q&A session. And of course, somebody was like, okay, hold on. Tell us the Snoop Dogg story, because we're all curious. So he's like, okay. So he was trying to do some different things, some fun things. And he called up his manager one day. He's like, all right, I kind of had a vision for this song. What if we could get Snoop Dogg?
Yeah, and what if I grew wings and could fly to Connecticut?
Apparently Snoop Dogg does a lot of stuff. I mean, Snoop Dogg is rich for a reason.
A reason, his next album.
Ben Rector's manager calls up Snoop's manager and says, hey, Ben wants to do a song, wants to have Snoop on this record. And I mean, I have no idea if Snoop knows who Ben Rector is. Let's just assume Ben is big enough that Snoop's like, oh yes, I love some Rector in the morning. Brian, you may have to edit
that
this
had
version.
to be an accident. That was great. All right, keep going. So we assume Snoop Dogg knows who Ben Rector is, although I just cannot fathom he does.
So Snoop's manager says, yeah, Snoop will do guest spots, and obviously there is a fee involved. Ben did not tell us the fee. We can just, all make our assumptions on that. But Ben said, okay, I just have one caveat. It's got to be clean. And I mean, Ben Rector is like the soccer mom favorite. Christians are definitely listening to Ben. They kind of assume he's got, a Christian background. I think we all know he does, but they expect, clean stuff that they can play when their kids are in the room. And so it's a risk for Ben to have Snoop on there. And Snoop's thing is that you get one take. He's not going to do a whole bunch of retakes. You get what you get. So Ben sends Snoop's management the song, and he has to wait like 6 weeks. I think Snoop is actually doing something for the Olympics. This was for the 2021 Olympics. But he wakes up one morning and he has the song back with Snoop. It got emailed to him. And so the song is called Sunday, and it's kind of this vibe where he's talking about, I assume he's talking about his girl, his wife, saying, you make me feel like it's Sunday, like this wonderful, relaxing day off, fun day, like all this stuff. So
is Ben Rector aware that there's a literal term called the Sunday Sads because you got to go to work? This is a funny title.
I mean, we're Christians. I think we should also be excited for Sunday because that's
Sunday
church
morning.
Day. But so he pops in the track and listens, and Snoop, and I'm butchering it a little bit. Don't quote me on these exact lyrics, but I'm definitely getting the spirit right. You have me feeling like it's Sunday, like Chick-fil-A is open on a Sunday, like weed has been legalized and it's National Blunt Day.
Oh my goodness. This is on a Ben Rector album
and
that's
so
coming
Ben
out.
is like, oh no.
Oh, did he freestyle? Did he just get a concept?
Yes.
Oh no.
So, I mean, Snoop does what Snoop wants because he's Snoop.
I thought Ben was sending him a song to sing or to rap. Of course this was going to go bad.
So Ben put it into Pro Tools. He did a whole bunch of editing, and he actually got what he wanted. He was actually more excited about what he edited.
I'm sure he was.
So he edited out the stuff that was very clean, and I guess obviously Snoop approved it because it ended up on the record. But man, we were just dying in the theater. This was hilarious.
You didn't have to sign an NDA to tell that story. That's hilarious.
He told it to 300 people in the theater.
That needs to be his if he does the late night circuit. I don't know if Ben Rector does that, but he should definitely use that as his story.
Or if he just wants to send me as a proxy, I'll tell the story for him.
I'm sure he would.
Okay, so speaking of Super Bowl halftime shows.
And people that only do one take and take no crap, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, wait, do you have more Super Bowl stuff?
No, I was segueing our guest.
Oh, I'd cut my own self off. We have someone that also takes no crap and only does one take. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Boggs, a touring audio guy for 20 years who has more stories than I have hairs on my head. Brian, welcome to the ChurchGear podcast.
Well, it's nice to be here.
So, Brian, I heard you're a little bit of a liar, a wee bit of a liar.
Yep.
We love to bring liars on this show.
It's the only people we bring.
Yeah.
We got to, redeem them, get them back into church.
That's right.
I'm going to list some of your accolades. One of them is a lie. Me and Toby are going to collab to figure out which it is. So, and play along. Here is Brian's accolades, or Boggs as we call him. He toured with Fuel in 2004 and mixed monitors for SR 701.
I love Fuel. I just got to say.
It's the only thing that keeps me going. In 2005, he worked for Joe Diffie in Nashville, and that's why he came to Nashville and was only going to stay a year. He met Mark Miller, the Casting Crowns producer and lead singer for Sawyer Brown. He did RF for Sammy Hagar. He mixed
Sammy Hagar.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
He mixed front of house for Wynonna Judd. He mixed Bishop T.D. Jake's Megafest in Dallas, Texas.
Now that's a preacher.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of compressors, yeah.
And then he mixed Coachella Festival, and he mixed Delbert McClinton. So a lot of mixing happening. I mean, Boggs, would you say your main thing is like mixing live shows up until recently? Basically your whole life?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So a lot of mixing,
we
a lot
gotta
of
guess
names.
this lie.
And
Do you have any sense?
I have a couple.
I've got my guess, but what do you think?
Okay, so you're already to that point. I think the mixing, like mixed 4, he's got 4 in a chunk. So I think on one hand, I think that you could slip the lie in there pretty easy. But also it kind of feels like his real life resume. So I think they're all true probably.
I know. What if he threw us that? I'm sure one of these is a lie, but I'm going to guess it was Coachella.
You think it's Coachella?
Just because I've never heard him talk about Coachella, but I wouldn't at all be surprised if he was at Coachella because he's mixed for so many amazing artists.
I was going to say, that's the problem is that, like, I've got, 2 good stories in my whole life. You're going to hear them if you meet me. Boggs has, 100,000. So we hear something cool every day when he's in the shop, and I'm like...
You got to just take a guess, Blake. Stop pumping up Boggs. We know he's awesome.
The first 3 bullet points, those first ones had too much detail. So I'm going to say it was... he did not mix front of house for Wynonna Judd. Boggs, what's our lie?
Oh, you want me to tell you the lie?
Yeah, we're locking it in. We're going different routes.
RF Sammy Hagar. And RF for Sammy Hagar is not a thing because they're rock and roll and they go hardwire. Or did in those days.
So did you work with them?
So Sammy's not singing on a wireless mic.
In 2004, no.
Okay.
Neither is Delbert McClinton.
But you did work with Sammy Hagar.
I did. Afterparty.
And can you tell Blake who Sammy Hagar is?
Sammy Hagar, Blake, was originally a solo rock and roll guy in the 1970s. Got involved with a guy named Ronnie Montrose, who had a band called Montrose. And then from there went as he was kind of a solo act, early 80s, replaced Davey Lee Roth and became the lead singer of Van Halen in 1986 on the 5150 tour.
Now, please tell us you know who Van Halen is.
I do know who Van Halen
great.
is.
Thank you.
I'm trying not to get fired on this episode.
That's great.
I think,
It was touch and go there for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know a little bit of this story, and I used the Super Bowl halftime. So where did you mix, Sammy? Or at least...
Technically, it wasn't. It was the Super Bowl after party.
Okay.
At the 2004 Super Bowl at Reliant Stadium in Houston, Texas, right next door to the Astrodome. So,
Okay.
And the sound company was Audio Analysts out of Colorado Springs, Colorado, which I don't think exists no more. I think they've sold out or went away since then. So.
And what was the board you were mixing on? Do you remember?
A Soundcraft 52-channel MH4.
Okay, Boggs, this is going to lead into a great story.
Sure.
So we met you 9 months ago, maybe.
Roughly, yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but basically I got a message on Facebook from your wife saying, hey, you should meet my husband, because we were trying to essentially give away
Correct.
a Soundcraft. What was the model again?
MH4.
MH4.
Yeah.
Because it was broke.
Right.
And she was like, my husband can fix that.
Right.
And we're like, tell us more about your husband.
Right.
So how in the world do you know how to fix a Soundcraft MH4?
From the beginning of my days as a young man, I worked for sound companies, and all the hoopah being on the road sounds like fun and games. But when you're not on the road, you go home and you fix and prep and tech and do all those fun things. So you think I'd know how to mix if I proximity effect of a microphone, right? The broom is here to sweep all the names up when I leave, and I'll put them in a
100%.
bag and
Yeah.
I'll take them with me.
Oh,
Yeah, but-
mic drop.
Please name drop.
So yeah, but just fixing gear over the course of time, you don't have enough time for me to tell you stories about gear breaking 7 minutes before a show's supposed to start.
Oh, I bet you I do have time. I'm gonna have you on a lot of
console,
episodes.
a console just losing memory, just things of that nature. So trial by fire. You know?
And I mean, please don't tell us, throw anyone under the bus, but I assume,
Sure.
If an artist up there of a certain caliber is up there ready to go and the board's broke,
Yeah.
they're not, being patient with you. They're like, you better fix this because the show starts any second.
Right. You do your best to not let them know, or at least when I was young, you panic, but you try not to let people know. You get older, you streamline it, and you figure out a way to just get through the process without panicking anybody. And if they don't need to know there's a problem, to them, if it's fixed, there's not a problem, So I guess that comes with time. Trial by fire as far as fixing things. And breaking a lot of stuff over the course of your young years, to be honest with you. So that's the truth, so what not to do. You learn what not to do.
So, Boggs, when we met you, you come and you look at this board, and then suddenly we just stole you. I mean,
Kind of, yeah. It was just more like, I remember meeting Brian and Toby, and you had a couple pieces of like old relic gear that we couldn't figure out who made them or manufactured them.
Yeah. And these were like
Right.
Class A,
Nice.
custom built, like
Sure.
studio. I think
Yeah.
one was a parametric EQ and
Right.
one's a dual mic
Preamp, click
like
pop preamps.
Yeah, it looked like an old
Yeah.
API or Telefunken or something.
Yeah, click stop. I'm sorry. And then I remember saying, okay, let's open them up. Brian said, open them up. And I said, let me meter them. And he goes, yeah, meter them. And I said, is that a trick question? He goes, no. So, and then from there, it was kind of like, hey, take a couple pieces of gear that we can't figure out how to fix. And I figured out how to fix them and fixed them and brought them back. And you guys have kind of been my friends ever since.
So at ChurchGear, you're kind of the guy that if anyone's like, where's Boggs? You're probably your head is inside a
Right.
console or a piece of gear. Like
Right.
it's open. There's circuits in
Everywhere.
front of your eyes, and
Right.
you're at component level testing and repair.
Yes. I don't do well with noodling around when my face is in a piece of gear. When my face is out of a piece of gear, I'll joke with you and the rest of the world all day long. But when it comes down to getting stuff done, that's why I'm here. So
yeah, it's funny because it's kind of like, if Boggs can't fix it, it ain't working. Like Boggs is
okay.
So the average tech, Boggs, is
Sure.
not necessarily inclined to open up their piece of gear, like pop the top and know like how to trace the components. Like what kind of personality trait, skill set, like what drives you to be interested to open up the gear and trace the circuit and find the problem?
When I was young, your ego, you got, what is it? The ID, the ego, and the superego, I think are the three components of our personalities. When you're young, it's all about mixing. I want to be able to mix, make a band happy, make a super ego musician happy, and you get really good at that. But then it comes down to what you're using to do that. So if you don't know how to fix what you're using, when you're young, you don't care. You just want to have a good show and go on. And when you get older, at least for me, you get older, it's like, there's a little more to this. Like I'm a drummer, if my drums break, I know how to fix them on the fly and no one will even know it. So I push myself to be able to do the same exact thing audio-wise, knowing how to recover from a problem and people not knowing it. And with that being a mindset, at least the last 5 to 7 years, knowing how to fix things has become a big part of my mind. Let's put it like that.
Well, speaking of fixing things, what was a show that like just everything goes to crap? That stuff hit the fan and now you've got to fix it. Like, and you don't have to say a name if you don't want to call anyone out, but like, what's just everything went badly.
But if you want us to sweep up these names off the floor, you're going to need to drop some more.
Okay, great. Shows that went bad. I had one in Salt Lake City one time, and it was as an engineer, you have shows that you fight to have a good show. Everything goes good all day long. Sound check, the gear's great. You come back, the show hits, and it's bad. So you push your way all the way through. Salt Lake City, 2010-ish.
You're doing the Book of Mormon, right?
Doing the Book of Mormon's correct. Downtown. No. So anyway, there's probably 10,000, 5,000, 10,000 outside. I have an M7.
The old faithful M7.
The
I've
M7?
never seen one of those.
Well, it's love-hate for me.
Since this morning.
M7, yeah. M7 during the show, 4 or 5 songs in, having a great show. Mix is great. PA's great. Crowd's having fun. Promoters happy. Console drops completely.
Like computer crashes.
Gone.
What is that? Okay. Yeah, what's that
DSP
mean?
just says no. It's still lit, but it ain't doing it. It's not doing anything. Band's still on stage with the monitor engineer with a separate console, still playing like nothing happened. It's
Can
just like
they hear? Are they on ears?
they're on ears, so they can hear
So they
everything
don't
they're
know.
doing. And it's just this really muddy kind of like show going on. And in the meantime, I'm picking my heart up off the ground and shoving it back into my chest, using a bunch of different words that I will not use here at ChurchGear's podcast episode. And the sound company brings in another M7 within like 15 minutes. Fortunately, I saved my mix on a stick and went from there.
We sent that M7 in to save that show, right, Toby?
Yeah,
100%. Even though ChurchGear
Yeah,
started
I
in 2019, 2020.
Well, we've
Right.
got a time machine. That's how
Exactly.
we
It's-
fixed every bad show in history that way.
Right.
We because Boggs made us a flux capacitor.
That's right.
Yes.
Which makes time travel possible.
Because the origin was Boggs is like, I got to go fix that show or I'm going to quit tech and my whole life won't happen. So, okay, so they pull that that board in and how
And
does
then
it go?
everything mix-wise goes fine, but my brain at that point is all the way out of the gig completely.
Well, was that the standard old M7 or was that an ES, like where all the stage boxes?
No, it was a standard M7.
So
the
you had to
standalone.
unplug
all the analog snake. The sound company did, but I was mad because at the end of the day, working for an artist on the road, they could care less about all the different problems you have. That's a part of your job.
Yeah.
Your job is to mix the show, make sure it goes flawlessly, regardless of who you have to deal with, regardless of the personalities you have to deal with, what have you. So
Is that a problem that you can like have a contingency for other than having a backup board on hand? Like, can you have a redundant live mixer? Does it work that way?
not historically, no. Depending on the tour and depending on the tour management budget, very rarely though. I mean, you have a sound company that supports your tour if that's in the package, which,
So if U2 is going out, they have their guys.
they're going to have everything.
But yeah, they'll have contingencies. They have, no budget. Taylor
No budget.
Swift.
Open check.
Yeah.
A matter of fact, I think U2 is one of the only bands that has a monitor engineer for each member in the band.
Wow.
Aerosmith, U2. What's the guy's name? There was a guy that I can't remember his name. American Idol guy that was out with Queen. He had his own.
Adam Lambert.
Adam Lambert had his own monitor desk for him. So Digico mixing ears for one mix. And
well, speaking of monitor mixing, we talked about Ben Rector in the story I had.
yeah.
Didn't you mix monitors a bit for Ben?
I mixed one tour for Ben on the biggest tour that we've done so far, which would have been 43 shows and 4 or 5 month run. Trying to think, that would have been fall of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of traveling because weren't you you were a PK, you were a preacher's kid, and then you turn into a traveling tech guy. So I mean, what's that like? You're out there on the road with Ben. You're not in the church anymore. Like you're doing all these shows.
And maybe Ben's a bad example. We
He's a-
assume, Ben's a good guy, but
Ben's
I'm
a
sure
great guy. Yeah.
you've been in shows where you're like, I ain't in church anymore.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Let's just say that other side exists.
So was it a shock to your system, like growing up
No.
in church and then heading out on the road, or?
No, not really. I grew up Pentecostal. I call myself now a Baptist-costal. But as far as the energy and the constant movement, My father was also a national evangelist in between pastor and churches. So I had some gospel travel in my life as a kid. Mom played piano, led choir, drilled the music in over hours with choir, the vocal, I started playing drums in church when I was 6. I was too short to reach the kick pedal.
Are you tall enough now?
Kinda, yeah.
Kind
I
of,
figured
yeah.
out I can set my stuff up the right way.
You're like, was it Def Leppard drummer that he has,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, all the special pedals because
Rick Allen.
he only has one arm.
He has one arm. That's
Yeah.
correct. So yeah, I still have challenges with drum thrones and finding my perfect posture to play drums. But as far as the transition, the velocity is a vortex, but the environment is totally different. As far as people have tough personalities. Sometimes you have tough personalities. Just constant movement, and that ticking trap we call a clock is the part that everybody kind of runs after.
Talk to me more about the personalities, because I actually wonder about this anytime I talk to people who work with famous level people. Is like, when you've got people of that stature and power coming at you all the time, how do you handle that? Like, how has it been? Like, how often? Let's not say names in this section, but I mean, just what's that like? I mean, that's pressure.
I kept it. I had an old mentor of mine who still lives here in Nashville. That no matter who you mix or who you work for, stay focused on why you're there. Period. You don't all the energy around it. Like when I would mix front of house, and I would mix anytime I would mix, I wouldn't pay attention to the crowd because I'm not there for the crowd. I'm there in connection with what the band's doing, what the music's doing, and that's it. I've never really been starstruck for anybody I've worked for because it's not necessarily who I loved growing up musically, if that makes any sense.
Boggs, how old were you when you hit the road, essentially?
When I first started making money and purchasing toilet paper, mixing audio, I was 22. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just your stories have jogged something in my memory when I think I was around 19 and I was working for just this small little production company in San Diego.
Yep.
And did occasional local events, but then they got set up to do a festival, and it was a Grateful Dead tribute festival, and with the Jerry Garcia band as the headlining band.
Oh.
And so, I mean, I was just mixing a side stage. And
Okay.
I think it was on, a Mackie 32 or something
Sure.
back in the day. And one of the guys in the company said, I also work for this major production company out of LA, and we're looking for guys for this tour.
Sure.
And again, I'm very sheltered at this point. My dad's a music director at a Baptist church. I'm barely allowed to walk down the street,
Right.
let alone go on tour with, and what it was, the European tour for the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Wow.
And so,
That's
I kind of have for a second, okay, go to Europe with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And then another second, I was like, well, my mom would never let me do it. And probably Jesus wouldn't want me to do it either, or the trouble I get into. So how would you, what wisdom would you drop on somebody just like me at that age that, has an opportunity to go out into this crazy touring world?
Yeah.
And how do they navigate that?
If you come from a church background, the advice I could give you just through experience is keep your prayer life strong. And I believe that the opportunities that you're not supposed to grab onto will somehow block themselves, or God will block them from happening. From a prayer standpoint, sorry to get spiritual, but that's how I believe.
Well, there's church in the ChurchGear podcast name, so you're good.
That's beautiful. Okay, so young people in church that have a desire to learn production, don't get caught up in the hoopla and the glory of it. Realize that behind that, it's an electronic approach, and know your stuff. Know it really well, and then the people you look up to that you think know it better than you do, know it better than they do. And don't stop until you really, truly get it. Know what you're doing. Know how every aspect of what you're using when you approach doing it, because mixing's only 5% of any portion of lighting, audio, video, what have you.
So you're also tech director at a church here in the Nashville area.
Yes.
So kind of give us some insight, the difference between being out on the road in the world with these major level artists to now you're serving at a church in a very servant leadership. Like, what's the difference between the people you work alongside and sort of the environment, would you say?
It's a 180-degree change. I think the church basis that I enjoy, there's obviously pros and cons on either side, but the church basis is seek ye first the kingdom, which is a far more fulfilling in that environment, being able to do production in church. From my standpoint, that everybody, even in church, the people that do and don't know certain things, their goal is the same, and that is seek ye first the kingdom. They're there to serve. Secular touring world, Christian touring world, that's a different aspect. The one biggest difference that I see, I was discussing it this morning at home, is that with touring, we spend so much time making everything Loctite, packaging, redundancy, constant, same thing the same way, over and over and over. Church world is more based around, let's get it perfect and then change it completely. And we do that over and over and over. And that's the one change that I've seen consistently since I've been in the church production world.
Does it feel like your blood pressure is much lower?
By far. Because church obviously is more forgiving. Working for national acts, you can get in 5 minutes and you can be gone in 5 minutes. It's that. There is no mediocrity. There is no, well, perhaps we'll see. There is none of that. So it's either yes or no.
And obviously we want to encourage churches to seek excellence. Like mediocrity should not be a measuring line.
Right.
So how do you've been on probably some tours, some live concerts where you're like, that was not flawless, nothing's flawless, but you're like, that is A-level, top of the world. And now you're in a church that has limitations. You have volunteers. You don't have professional touring musicians and gear and everything top of the line every single moment.
Right. I think with the church world, the one thing I strive for there is to take and maximize the ability of the gear at hand. Obviously, in touring world, it can be perfect, and then they'll want a different flavor of perfect. Church, when I see people passionate about what they're doing and what they believe in, I see that amongst their measurement, they're giving it all they can. I find a lot of fulfillment in that in comparison to getting the applause of the peanut gallery and the rock and roll country pop world. So
speaking of that, and being in a church, working with what you got, in your experience, is it like, we all hear that phrase that you get what you pay for, and that myth that the best gear is going to be the highest price. You're someone that works with used gear. You've seen the good and the bad. You've seen stuff that's broken, and then you fixed it. Right. Like, if you're trying to advise a church that doesn't have all the budget in the world, but they've got all the gusto and passion, like, how would you tell them to utilize their gear the best way possible, price tag excluded?
Understand, depends on what you're talking about, lighting, audio, or video. From an audio standpoint, obviously, good input is going to change everything. Great gain structure. Don't over EQ, don't over mix things.
And by good input, are you saying like, no top of the line mixer in the world is going to fix an out-of-tune guitar?
Correct.
Or poorly sung vocal?
You can have the greatest piano or a drum kit you can want, but if the person playing it, doesn't. It's not the gear, it's the ear, I guess, is the biggest at the end of the day.
Quote that, Blake.
It's not the gear, it's the ear.
It's the ear, yeah. So less is more. In a lot of circumstances, less is more. Just from a personal standpoint, I've done really well with way less, with the less approach. The space that you leave and don't mess with is usually what saves you at the end of the day in a bad environment.
So then would you say, let's say we've got, Ace Church Tech, he doesn't have the best gear, but he's got all the know-how. Would you take him over someone that, they don't really care, but they've got like the best gear in the world?
Absolutely. Any day of the week. So I'd rather take a talented person with mediocre gear any day of the week.
Well, that's good, because I'm not a church tech, but I would imagine if I was, I'd feel better knowing that even if my gear isn't the most amazing or expensive, I am the best person to bet on, not just I got to get another X amount of dollars for my setup to be good.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, Boggs, I want to know, is there a moment where you ever felt like, it may not have been literal duct tape, but you're like, I just did something to fix this solution and I hope it lasts the rest of the show, but it's like held together with
Yes.
quote unquote duct tape.
Yes, I had sure, with the duct tape analogy, but I had a side fill panel with a powered speaker. I'm not going to mention the brand. Basically, in the stereo input drop completely. The only way during the show, and I had about 4 songs left to go, and the side fills were really loud because I kind of have a reputation of being a really loud engineer. So I had to put them in mono, use the one aux in I had left, and copy all the same inputs over to the other side and go with it and hope it lasted.
That's exactly what I would have done as well. That's
I know
a good
you
approach.
would have. I know you would have.
I mean, Blake's known as a loud something, but not an engineer.
Okay.
Yep. I put my gain at max and I pull all my faders down. That's what Brian told me to do.
His wife usually asks him to turn his personality down, like when they're going out to nice events. She's like, "Can you turn your face down?" Essentially,
They still haven't found the fader on me, but okay.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
So you've got a lot of knowledge. You've done a lot of shows. We really love to end on a tech takeaway.
Sure.
Something that, you're church tech. You already do the best practices. You know what you're doing. What's something weird? What's something that only you, through some set of circumstances, have figured out? Like, oh, hey, yeah, that thing, do that. It'll make your Sunday service better. What would you recommend?
In all of your checking and sound checking, be resilient. Don't be stiff. Everything's subjective. Everything changes. Everything, especially with audio. So just be resilient and be flexible and don't be too stiff. It's not an exact thing. And pay attention to what the band's doing, especially. I mean, because dynamics change, vocal pitch changes, things of that nature change. And be open-minded about learning new things and learning anything you can learn from people that know more than you do. Be a sponge, I guess, is the best way I could describe it.
It seemed like every time we talk to a tech, you kind of have to have the skill to know what you're doing, but the courage to do what you don't know in the moment.
Sure.
Because sometimes it's just coming at you too fast.
Sometimes not doing nothing when you think you need to do something it really does work. Less is more. It truly is. Less is so much more, especially with mixing. Work your way into it. Don't mix your way into a paper bag. Don't mix into a wall. Don't be afraid of gain structure.
Well, Boggs, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yep.
This has been great.
Awesome.
I'm sure we'll have you on many more times as long as you stay at ChurchGear. Don't ever leave us.
I'm actually considering him replacing you as the host. So
I vote that right now. We'll call it the Boggs Log. We'll change the name of the podcast and everything.
Nah, I don't know.
he only does video. He's too pretty for podcasts.
There we go.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. And hey, congratulations on surviving Sunday. If you happen to make it through next Sunday as well, join us again for your weekly Tech Breather.
All right, Boggs, what do you know about the early service? What do you hear when you're in the warehouse?
I'm usually the only person awake at church for the early service.
No, I mean the early service for ChurchGear. What about our services for the ChurchGear early services?
I know absolutely nothing about the early service at ChurchGear. When is it?
And neither does the listener. So we'll tell you. It comes out every Monday. It's got the greatest gear you ever did done seen. And you can buy it before the whole world gets to it on Wednesday. Some of this stuff sells in like a minute.
You seem to have this habit of going country at the end of every episode.
There's just country Blake. I talk like this in my personal time, but when I'm at work, I talk like this. So
Yeah.